On this episode of The Word Made Fresh, we're going to talk about one of those passages in the Bible that liberal Christians typically like to kind of skip on over. I'm Reverend Jim Keat, the digital minister at the Riverside Church, and this is The Word Made Fresh, the weekly video Bible study and sermon prep resource where we talk about an upcoming lectionary passage, and then, you know the drill, comment on it, share it, use it to help you write a sermon, lead a Bible study, all that good stuff. Anyway, I'm out of breath because I was just running this little one-way loop here. See the arrow? Yeah, this is where the buses go at the elementary school here in Frankenmuth, Michigan. Well, they're not going right now because schools aren't really happening, but when they were, there's this like one-way route that they have to go through to pick up and drop off little learners at the school. I guess that's how it works. I don't know, it's been a while since I've been. So this week we're looking at the gospel text, which is probably one that most liberal pastors and Bible study leaders might just skip. You're probably going with Acts, aren't you? Yep, I knew it. Go with John. It's a juicy one, to say the least, intimidating. Let's read it. We're just going to read part of it to kind of get up to the portion that maybe you know is coming, and then we'll talk a bit about all of it, or at least we'll do our best. Okay, here's what it says. John 14 verses 1 through 6 is as far as we're going to go. The lectionary goes through 14, but it says this. This is Jesus talking to his disciples. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may also be. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Then he goes on to talk about prayer and a few other things, but I just want us to kind of pause there because that's the verse we are all well aware of. I am the way, the truth, and the life. But I think we forget to zoom out and see its larger context, specifically, literally the verse that just came before it. So let's talk about this whole section, this particular verse, for a few minutes. Now, I don't know about you, but this verse is often used as kind of a like one-way sign. See, there's only one way, and if you don't follow this way, well then, to hell with you. Literally, I guess, is how it goes. This is kind of the verse that's pulled out of John and proof texted to say, see, Jesus is it. This is the only way. Get your fire insurance, or, you know, we tried to warn you. Well, okay. I think the problem with this is that we've taken one little sentence and pulled it out of its larger context. And there's a couple things going on here. First, let's just sit within the context of this passage we just read. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's saying, okay, guys, about to go someplace, and I'm gonna come back and make sure we're all together. Cryptic, typical Jesus. Some scholars say that when he says he's going to his Father's house, he's referring to the temple, and he's gonna change the way we understand the temple, all this kind of stuff. Going to heaven, making rooms for us in heaven, whatever we understand that to mean. Regardless of those details, Jesus is saying, I'm going someplace, and then you're gonna come and be there with me. And Thomas, good old Thomas, says, we don't know how to get there. And that's when Jesus says this line that is so often used on billboards as kind of scare tactic, evangelistic, guerrilla marketing. Jesus is answering a question. We don't know the way. I am the way. If you know Jesus, you know the way. Jesus is not trying to come up with a quote that Christians can use when they're talking with people of other faiths. Jesus is just answering a question from one of his friends. I don't know the way. I'm the way. So it gives some comfort in the specificity. You have to read a verse like this in its context. We're quick to remove it from its context and just kind of put it all over the world. I'm the way, the truth, and the life is a great answer to a specific question, but it's not so good when we just use it as this oppressive, violent scare tactic for convincing people to join our team instead of theirs. And then a couple other things to keep in mind with this passage in particular is, well, just let's zoom out a little further. It's larger context in the Gospel of John. John, as we've talked about before, and as you probably know, it's the latest of the Gospels to be written, you know, much, much later after Jesus had left the scene. And spoiler alert, the Gospel of John probably was not even written by the person John. It was written by the community of people who had followed the teachings of John. So it's the Johannine, I never know how to pronounce that word, this one. How do you pronounce that? It's the book that reflects the teachings of this community. So it's not so much what Jesus said, but it's reflecting what this later community believed about Jesus. It's reflecting their beliefs more than kind of a video camera historical recollection. History is a modern invention, by the way. This whole like snapshot, if there was a camera there, how would it have looked, sort of historical reporting. That's not what the Gospels were ever trying to do. So we need to understand that the entire book of John was written much differently than Mark, which is most likely the earliest of the Gospels that we have in our Bibles, which is why it kind of goes a little loftier in its ideas and theology. It begins, in the beginning was the Word, this whole logos philosophy, and it kind of continues with this more, heady, intellectual, theological approach. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, great writing, love the content, but we need to recognize that it wasn't a kind of person on the street video camera recording of what happened. So that's an important thing to keep in mind too. Jesus is answering a specific question. This whole book is a reflection of what the community believed about Jesus, and that kind of gets to some of the scholarship you may have encountered back in the 80s, was it? The Jesus Seminar. This was a group of biblical scholars who got together to kind of make their best effort to understand of the Gospels, what do we think Jesus actually said, and what is more of a reflection that the communities were having Jesus say. Now, we might already be causing a lot of you to hit that dislike button if you're not a fan of the Jesus Seminar. This is a very divisive thing. Some people are like, ooh, the worst thing ever. They used ping pong balls to vote. Or you're like, yeah, that's good scholarship. Let's think critically about these things. Well, all this to say, I'm the way, the truth, and the life did not really pass the Jesus Seminar as, did Jesus actually say it? Now, that makes me think of what N.T. Wright, a kind of moderate, sometimes even conservative New Testament scholar, once said about this particular passage. And this kind of zooms us out a little further from that particular question Jesus is answering, further than the book of John itself, and to just the context of the first century. And N.T. Wright, he says, it's not a matter of asking, did Jesus say that phrase? It's a matter of asking, is this the kind of thing a first century rabbi would have said? I don't think we ever asked that question. We just think, Jesus made up all this stuff. Well, he lived in a context, he was borrowing the language and the metaphors of the people around him. And N.T. Wright says, yes, this is the sort of thing a first century rabbi would say. A rabbi's teaching would be seen as the way, the truth, and the life to understand Torah. And that's really what we see Jesus saying here in his, of course, kind of Jesus spin on things. I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you're asking the question, how do we get to this place that you're talking about Jesus? How do we get to this peaceable kingdom of nonviolence and love and justice? Well, Jesus is saying, just follow me. That's kind of a thing Jesus said a lot too. I'm the way. This is what a rabbi would have said to their followers. And so Jesus does the same. Now, that's a lot. We've looked at this particular passage, the entire gospel, the larger first century context in which all of this would have been happening. And I think it's important to start there as we bring these words into the world around us. What does it mean to be a person of faith in a world of many faiths? It can't mean that we just impose violence on them because they're different. That just perpetuates an us, them, I'm right, you're always wrong, my way's called heaven, your way's called, well, see you in hell. No, that seems to be the antithesis of what Jesus was about. And we can't just cherry pick this passage, this phrase, and use it as our campaign slogan or to justify our whatever aggressive, violent, oppressive means that we call evangelism. So I guess I just want us to think about this text, this particular passage that chances are we skip right over and just, let's look at the other lectionary passages this week. Yeah, I don't blame you. But you also can't look at it as just a giant one-way sign, as if this is the only way. Jesus is being very particular and contextual, and so how do we continue to live our particular and contextual lives without just always superimposing that onto the universal? Or did I just open a really slippery slope of like saying, well, this one passage that's hard for me to understand, well, that one is contextual, but you know, passages about love and justice, well, they're universal. All right, let's talk about both of these things. First, what do you think about Jesus' words here? I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Maybe what have you heard, and how do you hold those words now? And then second, is this a fair way to look at all these scriptures? Am I cherry-picking my own hermeneutic? Whew, I don't think so. I like to think that it's important to always start with the context. This isn't to deny the ways in which it resonates in our current beings and world today, but I think we need to recognize these words came from somewhere. Am I a bad postmodern for saying that? Maybe. That's fine. I don't know. We'll get into that another time. I'll go read some John Caputo to make up for it. All right. Go answer those questions, leave a comment, and we'll be back next week with another episode of The Word Made Fresh. Oh, and are you listening to Be Still and Go? We have this new season out every Sunday, a new episode, and they're all inviting you to do something you already do. We recognize you might not have your normal daily commute to listen to podcasts like you might have before COVID, but you're still like folding laundry and taking walks and, you know, washing dishes and making dinner. So we're trying to create audio devotional reflections that you can listen to while you do those things to help let you find, you know, the sacred in the mundane and the Christ in the common and the divine in the daily. So just go right here to this website or just open your favorite podcast app and subscribe to Be Still and Go. I should never throw my phone on camera. I'm always so nervous I'm going to drop it. All right. I'll see you next week.